Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a new episode of Iblis Manifestations podcast. On this week's episode, I have had the privilege of having my friend Simon Lucas, the drummer from the renowned UK black metal band Winterfylleth, on the show, and we discussed a lot of very cool topics. We covered a lot of topics in regards to the experiences with the paranormal, which was a nice throwback to the very first episode of the podcast that I have done. And we spoke of a lot of Simon's experiences as an official camera crew for the TV show Most Haunted, and some of the crazy experiences that they had on that set. And also we discussed a lot of things in regards to spirituality and its connection with music and black metal in particular. I hope that you guys will enjoy this episode. As always, I very much appreciate your time and you guys checking out the podcast. Feel free to subscribe, share, and do all of the good stuff that you people do in supporting the podcast. I very much appreciate your time, and I hope that you will enjoy the episode. So now, please welcome my good friend, Simon Lucas from the band Winterfylleth to Iblis Manifestations. Cool, man. Yeah, well, first of all, Simon, welcome to the show. Thanks for jumping on.
How you doing, Shine? All right?
Yeah, all good, man. And first of all, before we get into it, and I spoke to you previously, but congratulations again on getting engaged.
Thank you. Yes. That's very kind of you. Cheers.
Sure, man. I hope it didn't take too many tricks or anything to get the yes out.
No. I think she kind of knew that what was going on. She kept guessing. Yeah. Well, she kept dropping hints for a while. So a surprise trip to York, and she got the picture.
All right,
cool, man. A surprise.
Yeah, I'm happy for you. York is a nice place to do it as well. I've actually just been there earlier today.
Oh yeah.
Down. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, because it was Soli's birthday yesterday. So.
Yes. Of course.
Yeah. I've been traveling all over the fucking place, man. I'm a man of my word, and I don't like I don't like not doing stuff, but I'm pretty fucked up today, so
yeah. Long weekend.
Yes, yeah, we were doing a project, and I physically actually had to get beaten up in order for the project to work. And then it's typical Trivex shit, man. I'll fill you in on the details later on, but I don't know if you can see here or not, but my shoulder's all fucked up.
Oh yeah, Jesus, okay. Suffering for your art. That's the
absolutely. If your art is not worth suffering for, then what the fuck is going on?
And you have certainly done that in your lifetime, haven't you, man?
Sure, yeah, and it's not for the sake of special treatment. It's just for the freedom more than anything.
Yeah, of course.
Freedom is always worth fighting for, if you ask me.
Oh yeah, I respect that massively. So fair play to you. That's cool. That's brilliant.
Yeah. Well, you did the interesting thing of obviously, you actually reached out to myself because you were giving me some really cool feedback about the episodes and stuff. And you briefly mentioned something really cool. So since we've started the podcast, obviously, I actually opened the episodes with a series of paranormal stories, which I had to tell about sort of the situation that I had about 5-6 years ago at a flat in Birmingham. So, and then you mentioned that you had actually some experiences of your own, and then you actually used to operate in a part of a crew for a show that was taking place in the UK, which was basically about paranormal experiences. So I'm super curious to actually know your experiences of that.
Yeah. I was listening to your podcast, as I'm an avid consumer of podcasts on all sorts of different stuff. And obviously listen to it primarily, obviously because I know you, and thought it was interesting. And obviously, but there's the link with black metal there. And then obviously your first episode was talking about this, pretty incredible looking back on it, I'm sure you see it's incredible. At the time, I'm sure you were a bit freaked out.
I think it changed me too much for me to even realize like whether the impact is, good or bad. It's one of them things, I wouldn't necessarily change it now because it's led to who I am today, which is to try and be a more compassionate person, not just physically, but also to the metaphysical world.
Yes, 100%. I can relate to that. And those situations when you're in them, as I'm sure you felt, that they can be really stressful, can't they? Because you've especially moving into a house, you're spending a lot of money, or a flat, it's costing a lot of money, and then something like that happens, and you've got to stay there for a period of time, and you don't know what's going to happen. This stressful stuff's happening. There's no seemingly rational explanation on the face of things, certainly with the kind of phenomena that you seem to be experiencing that was manifesting in that apartment. But some of those phenomena, I can relate to, and I've seen similar things in places over my lifetime. And most notably, as you say, I used to be a camera operator on the TV show, the rather notorious TV show Most Haunted, which I don't know if you've ever seen it yourself, Cheyenne.
I see. Yeah, I have done in the passing, maybe a few years ago. I think I was staying with our old guitarist's house, and I think, if I'm correct, his mother actually had it on TV.
Yeah, that was the main fan base was middle-aged women.
All right. Goth women, at least, I hope. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. So
tell me about that. What were some of your experiences like on the set and on the show?
Well, rather strangely, most of the time, because obviously Most Haunted primarily is an entertainment TV show.
Yeah.
So
sure.
It's at the time it was on Sky TV, like those channels like Living TV that they used to have. And basically we do the shows, and a lot of stuff on it. The thing people always ask you when they know you've worked on Most Haunted is, was it fake? Was it real? Blah, blah, blah. And obviously an entertainment TV show, you've got to kind of keep the energy up and keep people interested and exciting.
I can appreciate that there might be some degree of sensationalism, because at the end of the day, it's a TV show, and it's, like you said yourself, it's about entertainment.
Yeah. And what I would say is, whilst there wasn't any outright fakery going on, I'll be careful with my choice of words there. There certainly was,
let's call it.
Yeah, there certainly was sensationalism in terms of, hyping up atmospheres in places, because you got to keep people. If you're going to be filming a TV show in an old manor house and nothing happens whatsoever, that's going to be a pretty boring TV show. So you've got to keep you got to keep the energy up. But what I would say is, stuff would always happen, strange stuff that we'd always be looking at one another. Did you do that? No. Did you? No. And it was always when we got to locations and we were setting up. Before the cameras were rolling, we'd just be finding our bearings around the place. Say, for example, if it was an old manor house, we'd be working out the layout, having a recce around, and stuff would generally happen then. And then, more worryingly, when you're packing away afterwards, so you'd finish filming, stuff would always happen when you're taking the cameras down, which is really frustrating, but used to happen quite a lot. One of the best examples was actually before I started working on the show. We used to have a lot of people when we do a live version, which is called Most Haunted Live. It was broadcast live over the course of a week, and there was an episode over in Romania, in all the castles linked with the Dracula,
of course,
legends, and obviously Vlad the Impaler history. Mm-hmm. And we used to get people that would threaten the crew physically, like that they were going to hide in the location and jump out and attack us live on air. It was just a thing that we used to have to deal with, and we used to have these security guards that would be with us all the time. and they would always scan the locations before we started filming in them to make sure there was no people.
Why was that? Why were people targeting you and trying to attack the show?
Just because people are idiots.
Okay. No, well, I know that people are idiots, but I'm curious, like, is this because they didn't want the area to be sort of, for lack of a better word, exploited, or was it their heritage? What were they trying to defend?
Nothing as honourable as that, I'm afraid.
Right. So they were just being assholes, basically.
It was just people, like, I guess the paranormal equivalent to people streaking across football pitches, people knowing it was a live TV show, people knowing that there's nothing the TV crew can do if they run out and they're live on TV. Their little 5 seconds of fame on, causing some newspaper headlines. Luckily,
I think I get you. So it's like the guy who runs at the news reporter and goes, fuck her right in the pussy or something like that. It's along those lines.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. So we have to be really careful of people like that, because that kind of thing can get a TV show taken off air, and obviously thousands of pounds were at stake for that sort of thing. But anyway, this is a rather long-winded way of telling this story. So the security guards used to have this thermal imaging camera, which we also used to use in the investigations, which meant they could do a sweep of the location and check for like heat sources, see, if anyone's hiding in like a cupboard or whatever. And they're in this location in this castle in the middle of Romania, huge castle. And there's this courtyard with 4 towers on each corner, solid stone floor. And
that sounds massive.
Oh yeah. It's a huge castle. It's a really huge place. And it's one of the castles associated with the Vlad the Impaler in prison. I think he was imprisoned there. And anyway, the security guard is checking for people, and he's got the thermal imaging camera scanning the courtyard. And this is a solid stone courtyard. And he sees on the thermal imaging camera, and it was recorded and played out on the show, the image of a person climbing up a staircase, which was not there. So the staircase looked as if it was in the middle of the stone floor, but he could see the heat image of a person climbing out of this staircase and then walking across the courtyard. And there's absolutely nobody there. And it was recorded, played out. Nobody could ever explain it. It was just a really strange thing that occurred. That was when the crew were just setting up cameras in the place. Stuff like that would always happen.
So was this, did you guys actually capture this then, or no?
Because, yeah.
Okay.
It was recorded on a thermal imaging camera. They played it out on the show later on.
I see. Wow.
So it was pretty good kind of evidence of something. I'm pretty on the fence with supernatural stuff. I think we probably share a similar worldview on the supernatural. I'm open to appreciate that things like that exist, but I'm not gonna sit here and say, right, ghosts are the spirit of dead people. I know exactly what they are, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, if these things exist, then we don't know what they are.
It could be anything. I mean, I have many theories of my own about it. I have experienced, obviously, a lot of stuff. So for me, it's concrete information, which I go by. And the tricky thing with this as well is it's a little bit like the God argument, because everyone is always like, well, what's your evidence that that's there, or kind of thing, you know what I mean? And it's like, and obviously the God thing is a completely different conversation, because I think our understanding of such a thing to begin with is I think we approach it in the wrong way anyway. But I think that as far as the spirit realm, if you will, I have feelings that obviously this is, again, pure speculation, but I do believe that actually there are things that do happen externally, but I also think that it's actually the presence of human of another human life there that makes those things happen, because I think that we somehow, let's say there's somehow like these cobwebs that have the characteristics of a person that once used to be at a place in time. There are these cobwebs that are in place. And those cobwebs, whether we call it the memories, the characteristics, thoughts of a person that once used to be there, they might be etched to that location, or the energy format. However, when another person arrives in that place, I think that with our brain waves or something, somehow, I think that we can probably feed into that. And once we feed into that with our own thoughts, then that somehow actually gives it life and it allows it to grow and get bigger. Because one of the things that I noticed was that during the time that I was in that flat in Birmingham, it was actually that it was sort of like the more we became afraid, the more everything kind of got crazy whilst we were there, the more intense these experiences were getting also. Now, you might be able to say that, okay, maybe you were just getting so afraid and you got so stuck in that mindset that you just stopped questioning and stopped accepting things. But when I say that, I really mean it in the sense that the physicality of the experiences which we were having was becoming more intense, i.e. boxes being moved around the house, clothes being folded, being
tangible things.
And then there was like a poster. I avoided saying this in the previous episode, but there was like a poster there with my face on it from an old Tribex show, which we played back in May 2016. And that, it looked like someone had gone and actually folded the face. So whatever was there was not very happy with me.
Yeah, that's a very direct symbolic thing, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I had a picture of a dead child on a card, which I still have here. And that was turned around because, and I think that's very interesting. I had some more experiences more recently as well.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. It was a very strange one. This happened that without getting into the details of my work environment, besides the band and like all the other shit that I do, I was so basically the whole place is CCTV. The whole entire building has CCTV of every corner, and the only place that doesn't have CCTV is the kitchen. I don't know why that is, but that's the only place where it doesn't have any CCTV. And this was like in the early hours of the morning, and I was there on my own before we opened up the place, and I was there, and we had two of the cleaners there, and they're not English, they're from like Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
So you can tell the different accents.
Yeah.
And I hear a guy talking around the back, and I'm like, who the fuck is this? Have we got someone in doing repairs or some shit? And I listened for it, and it's a very strong Yorkshire accent of a guy. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, who's this? And I come around and I check, and there's no one there. And I go and have a look in the kitchen because I was just making my coffee. I need fucking morning coffee to survive, like most people, I think.
Yeah.
And and then, long story short, I go around to the front. I come to the realization that there's actually no one else in the building because there's no one signed in. There's no one else who's supposed to be there. And then I go back to the kitchen, and this building is, I can't tell you how fucking secure it is. Okay. Again, like I said, I don't want to get into the details of what the place actually is, but rest assured it's a fucking secure place. So no one's going to like break in or anything. And if it does, like we've got alarms and everything like that. And I go to the kitchen, and this box of lentils is moved on the floor, opened, and there's lentils everywhere on the floor in the kitchen, and some trays and stuff has just been moved to the middle. And I saw that, and I was just like, okay. So I go back, look at all of the CCTV footage. I don't see anything. And then when one of the managers come in, I'm like, I need to see where the fucking CCTV footage for the kitchen. And they're like, yeah, the kitchen's the only place that doesn't have CCTV. So I was like, okay. So to the point of what you said, where you said every time you put the cameras away, then shit would actually start happening. There is definitely some kind of intelligence to whatever these experiences are.
It's really strange. I know a lot of people will probably listen to this and just kind of, think, oh my God, what the hell are they talking about? That's ridiculous. And I think until you really experience something genuinely like this, I like to approach these things with a rational mind. And I know, like Chris is a complete, he's a total atheist, doesn't believe in anything spiritual whatsoever. Not to say he's not a spiritual person, but he doesn't believe in the supernatural world at all. And he would argue till he's blue in the face that this stuff doesn't exist.
Sure.
But, that's fine. That I can understand. I can totally understand that. But I know that I've seen stuff that I can't explain. And whether that is, like I said before, whether that's the soul of a dead person manifested as a ghost or some extra elemental energy that's manifesting somehow, there's always a link to some kind of energy, I think. As you were saying before with your experience in the flat, these things seem to be able to feed off energy. And there's an interesting theory that explains, involving energy, that explains one type of very visual haunting that people report seeing over the years. And I don't know if you've ever heard this, but your explanation on what you believe these things to be kind of ties in with this. But there's a scientific theory that's been put forward over the last 50 or so years called stone tape theory. I don't know have you ever heard of that? You're familiar with that at all?
It rings a bell, but please do elaborate.
So stone tape theory basically works on the premise that obviously we have naturally occurring electromagnetism around us at all times. And obviously that's naturally occurring in the earth. And obviously, if you think of a cassette tape or a VHS tape that has either an image recorded onto it or a music recorded onto it or audio, that actual tape itself is made of copper oxide, which is obviously an element within stone, certain types of stone. So most of our buildings, and there's a lot of stone around us at all times. Mm-hmm. So this theory basically puts the idea forward that there can be elements within stone that, when charged with electromagnetism, have recordable properties given the right energy levels in a scenario or a situation, whether there's something with heightened emotions or whatever, where there's a lot of energy flying around, that electromagnetism can record that scene into the stone of, say, like an old manor house, or whatever that be, whether it's a building or it's some naturally occurring rock or whatever. So that kind of tries to explain the type of ghosts that people see, to use a really obvious supernatural example and a trope of Gothic horror, like the spectral monk in their monk's habit, in their robes. So if, like, that is the soul of somebody that has died, their clothes are inanimate objects. Their clothes can't come back to haunt a place. The soul of the person, theoretically could, but the clothes can't. They're inanimate. So how do people see ghost clothes on people, like the ghost of a soldier or something like that? A Roman soldier or whatever. So this idea puts the idea forward that maybe these types of hauntings are recordings recorded into the stone of a manor house or wherever that may be, that, given the right atmospheric conditions, can play that image or that audio back into a space. And when people experience those types of hauntings, that is actually nothing more than just a recording of a scene in history. And I think that's really interesting. I think there's a lot to be said for that. Of course, what it doesn't do is explain every type of haunting. So it certainly doesn't explain the kind of things you've experienced in your flat.
Yeah.
But I think it could go so far as to explain a certain type of haunting, a certain type of ghost. And I think that's really interesting. And I know that a lot of academic parapsychologists have actually done a lot of work on that and continue to do a lot of work on that. Academically speaking, actual genuine academic research. So it'd be really interesting to see how science progresses over the next, few decades, to see if anything like that can actually be documented scientifically.
I have very strong feelings that already exist. The public just doesn't have access to it.
Well, yeah, quite possibly. Quite possibly. There's a lot of these things that we may, find out in years to come with the Freedom of Information Act. It's like the British government UFO files from like the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
They were hidden for years, and then they actually got released a few years ago. They were quickly swept under the carpet so that people didn't pay attention to them. There wasn't a lot of media coverage from them. But there was a guy called Nick Pope who used to work for the Ministry of Defence, and I think he was quite instrumental on using the Freedom of Information Act to actually get these papers released. And they covered things like the Rendlesham Forest incident over in Norfolk, just outside a US Air Base, where there was a famous UFO incident. It was known as the British Roswell. It's quite interesting if you ever get a bit of time to read up on that. But yeah, there wasn't much in the public eye said about that when the MOD actually did release those papers, as I'm sure you can understand. You know what these things are like. But yeah,
so what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I do appreciate what you're saying. Like, there's a lot of things like this that do happen, and then, like you said, they get swept under the radar, and very rarely you'll see or hear any mention of them in the mainstream media. I mean, I'm going to play the devil's advocate here and say that there is probably some sense to the fact that this information is protected, but also at the same time, I feel like, well, what the fuck are we all doing then? You know what I mean? It's like, if we don't, these are the things that allow us to have a better understanding of life in general and get closer to the truth. So if we are not living for the truth, then what the fuck are we doing? And we are just existing, and we're just feeding from the planet, and then every single person is taking in all of these resources to do what exactly? Just survive and be a battery and then die off? That doesn't seem very, I don't know, that doesn't seem right to me. I think that we've evolved the way that we have for a fucking reason, whether it was through an external influence or what, that's its own thing. But currently speaking, I think that we are existing for a purpose of finding the truth.
I think you're right. And I think the problem with society now is we live in such a materialistic age. We live in a really a-spiritual age where, most, certainly people in the Western world, an increasing number have a real lack of spirituality, and they live for a very material life. And that's part of the problem with, I guess, capitalism as the way it is. I don't want to get into too much politics in that sense, but in the sense that we live in a very aspiritual age, I think that helps those big multinational corporations sell us stuff that we think we need. And I think the more we're glued to little black boxes, like endlessly scrolling through meaningless crap that we don't really need that regularly. They're gathering information. And a lot of people think, there's this whole thing, people think there's something really sinister about that. And there could be, I don't know. But I think a lot of it is pure marketing to sell us stuff, for us to get into debt, so we're constantly paying back money for the rest of our lives, money that we don't have. And that's we could talk about that stuff all night, the whole debt stuff, which is just It's pretty mind-blowing the way society is set up. But also, we've got to the point in which we have the best kind of quality of life that the average person has ever had on this planet. Yet there is a cost to that, and we seem to have lost that that sense of spirituality, and even like connection to the landscape, and that connection to that sense of some kind of spiritual divine, whatever you want that to be. Most people don't seem to have that anymore, and that's part of the reason why we do what we do with Winterfylleth, trying to what really resonates to us is a kind of reverence for the landscape around us. The forest, the mountains, the land, just the rolling hills of the countryside. There is spirituality to be found in that, whatever your religious views may be. And I think that's really important to kind of get people off their phones and getting a more spiritual outlook in their life, whatever that may be.
Well, I think the thing is that, first of all, you mentioned that there's a lack of spirituality in today's world. I 100% agree. Of course, absolutely. I can't entirely blame the population, first of all, because of how badly all the religions are fucked up. They've all got blood on their hands, be it Islam or Christianity. I am very certain that there is good in both.
Yeah, 100%.
Even though I sometimes tend to almost act a little angsty, especially when it comes to Islam, because I do feel a lot of vitriol towards that religion for very obvious reasons.
Yeah, with your background, however, that's understandable.
Yeah, it's just the one I grew up with. But the thing of it is that I can see good in all of those. But like you said, everyone is sort of put into a position where you're just meant to consume and consume and consume until you fucking die, and whilst you are consuming, you are being consumed by the system. And this is exactly what I mean, that I feel that our purpose is much deeper than just to exist and to eat and be eaten, basically, until we die off. I believe that every person who actually exits a womb and is a person, and they grow and they become a human and they start interacting with the world, I believe that there's a duty of each one of us in this lifetime to somehow try and get a step closer to reality being understood, to truth. I feel that whatever that can be,
I think that's really
it's
nice
almost
outlook.
like it feels like almost like an impossible task, when throughout history you've got things like the Library of Alexandria fucking burning down, and certain things, whether it's certain parts of the pyramids going missing and things like that. But generally speaking, I think that we're very far from where we probably need to be. And that I think something is resisting that. Something is resisting us finding out the truth. And I think that the best thing that at least we can try to do in our own lifetime is to try and get close to it as much as we can, whether it's through art, through studies, through knowledge, and actually through bravery. Bravery is a very fucking important thing to... It's a very important outfit to wear when it concerns trying to get closer to the truth. Now this truth for me is a point where all of the scientific discoveries and the spiritual practices and everything that we know all roll into one, where we reach one high conclusion, and that is the thing that I think we should all be seeking more than anything.
And I think ultimately, science is all the science that we've learned over the history of mankind is the sort of great kind of search for that divine truth, isn't it? It all feeds into that one purpose, doesn't it? And
correct.
And that will continue to, hopefully, that will just continue on an upward trajectory. And who knows what we'll know in 100 years' time. You know, if you'd have gone back 100 years and say, this is what the future will look like, this is what we know scientifically, people would have seen so much of that as supernatural, wouldn't they? And I think that's quite interesting.
Absolutely. If you think about it, a lighter is magic. Okay.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Magic with the CK, you know, the fact that you create an ignition at the tip of your hands and then a fire is born is fucking crazy if you think about that, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I think, what was I going to say? I had a point about this whole kind of material world just being a way of detracting people from that spiritual path. And like you said, you can't really blame people for that. I don't blame your average person for falling into that trap, but it's certainly something that I've felt. I've noticed when I've been too distracted by material things over the years, and you lose sight of your kind of spiritual essence, so to speak, and it's certainly something I've been trying to regain over the last couple of years. I think I lost it for a few years, and
I think that the last 2 years has been a massive waking call for almost any of us, really. I mean, that we can, there's like a whole thing there that we can get into, you know, whether it's that, obviously as of 2012, we did actually enter the age of Aquarius, you know, and you can slowly see the effects of that, and that the world that we live in is not actually like the same as what it was before, and truth has a very important place in all things, really. But I think that, see, you mentioned something as well. I just want to clarify, because I'm just for the case, like, I'm not actually I'm not anti-capitalist at all. You know,
I'm not either.
I value competition, but I do completely see that when the system is corrupt like this, you know, and every
people
person
take advantage of it, don't they? You know.
Well, the thing is, you know, people take advantage of it, and after they have reached a position of power, that's when they then try to promote ideas of, I suppose, communism. Why? Because then no average person has the capability of growing powerful or becoming powerful on their own for themselves. You know,
Sure.
and that is something very important for people to pay attention to. That we as people, we want the power. You know, we want to grow. We want to get better for ourselves. And one thing that the last 2 years has done is strip the people of their power massively. You know, but obviously that's a thing of their own. You know, we also need to remember that we also have a choice. We very much have a choice in the matter, you know, and sometimes all it takes is just simply saying no and accepting whatever comes with it, you know, and just standing your ground. I think that's a very important thing for people to realize in any situations, not just the last 2 years, but especially that, you know.
Yeah, certainly. To bring the conversation back round to the original kind of topic of spectral manifestations, so to speak, and ghosts and hauntings and that kind of thing. One thing that interested me that you spoke of witnessing in the apartment that you were in was that manifestation of a kind of smoke emerging out of the was it the closet that you could see some.
That's right. Yeah. So we had the wardrobe at the end of the bed, you know, which had a magnetic lock, and then we witnessed that open and close itself. But there was also a smoke substance, almost like vape smoke, where it looks quite heavy and thick, that going in and out through walls and things like that, which was the weirdest fucking thing to see. But yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, I've seen there's quite a lot of photography of that kind of manifestation that people there's quite a lot of that kind of thing that you can easily find online, where people have taken photographs in places where you wouldn't there's nothing to explain why that kind of thing is there. And I've seen that for myself in certain places. When filming Most Haunted, actually, we were filming a series in the Czech Republic in various locations around Prague. And we were in a castle called Castle Huska, which was a really notorious place. It was, if you want an interesting read, look up Castle Huska, because it's a castle that's built in the Czech countryside, 2 hours towards Germany from Prague. And from the outside, it just looks like a manor house. But from the inside, it's fortified from the inside, as if to stop things getting out. It's not built defensively to stop attackers from the outside getting in. Anyway, the local legend is that it was built on top of this gateway to hell, basically. And it was built to plug this gateway to the underworld. And there is an extensive cave system under there. So whether that's just local folklore people, or it was maybe a medieval landowner that wanted to scare away the local peasants from trying to get into his castle, it's quite an elaborate ruse to stop them doing that.
Sure.
Because it's completely unfortified from the outside. But there is a church built in the castle that's supposedly right slap bang on top of where this pit is. And inside the church is loads of paintings of depictions of demons and demonic kind of imagery all over the wall, painted from the medieval period. And when we were in there, we were doing tests with thermometers to measure the temperature of the ambient temperature of the ground there. And our parapsychologist that used to work on the show, who's a doctor of parapsychology, Kieran O'Keefe, he plotted this temperature circle where he said there has to be a pit under here. There's no other explanation for this temperature change, directly under this church. And people in the medieval period used to say that strange creatures would climb out of this pit and roam the countryside, which is why this castle was built to plug this hole. Whether that's true or not, obviously, is down to medieval folklore.
Could be a lot of things, couldn't it? You know.
Oh yeah.
There's like so many things that can get twisted and then turn around over time. This is another thing as well. I am like I do actually question stuff. I don't just like say yes to everything that's like that. You know what I mean?
Oh,
it's like even there's a story. You know, just to the point that you brought that up. I'm pretty sure. I think there was even a thing about Elizabeth Bathory, you know, which obviously all of us black metalheads are fucking obsessed with, you know. But there was even a thing about her that
there she is. There, she's right there.
Right on, yes. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. But there was even a thing with her, which is like it's a very unromantic kind of a thought to even have about her, you know, knowing that we always thought she was one of us. You know, she killed people and bathed in virgin blood. But actually someone was saying that there were other men who just wanted her land, and she owned shit tons of land, so they just made up this fucking story about her to get her imprisoned and shit. And that's also, I think, very possible if you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite plausible, that is, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Especially with medieval views on women and the misogynistic view that people have had of women over millennia, you know. But Huska's a really interesting place, and in fact, a rather dark period of its history during the Second World War. It was occupied by members of the SS, and the SS apparently conducted really strange occult experiments there, which is a whole other subject, because they recognised that there was a supernatural sort of element to this place. And when we were filming there, we filmed for a day there, and we all saw strange mists inside the castle.
Right. Okay.
Which were similar to what you described seeing, that had no rational explanation as to why they were there. This was around Easter when we filmed that, so it was around April time, and this is back 2010, so about 12 years ago. 12 years ago to this exact time, actually. And we experienced strange things there. We saw strange mists moving slowly around the place, heard weird noises. And one of the really weird things that happened, we'd just come off the back of filming a really long series, and I've just got a pop-up that's just covered my screen, bear with me. And we had this guy working on the show who was a bit of a I want to emphasize the fact he was a self-styled demonologist. I'll say no more about it, but fair enough. And at the end of the show, he was filmed standing in the middle of this church, reciting all these medieval occult incantations for a good period of time. And on the footage, you can see this like briefcase fall over and all these papers fly out. And what was really strange, after that, loads of really bad stuff happened after those incantations were filmed and the show went out. We were de-rigging everything, taking all the cameras down, and one of the riggers that, there's a big TV crew there, one of the riggers was this guy. He was in his 50s. He was taking down part of the lighting rig, and he fell down a hole in the middle of the castle and shattered his hip. For some reason, we always had an ambulance on site in case anything happened. And the ambulance, for some reason, had already left, even though we were still working on site. So he's lay at the bottom of this pit in this castle with a shattered hip. And straight after that, the demonologist got a phone call that both his dogs had died at home in England, and all this strange shit started happening, and it was really weird. It was like this atmosphere really got really bad. And after that, they didn't make Most Haunted for 5 years or so, something like that. It just stopped because it got way too much for everybody. And
I mean, that's fucking crazy, but like, I think I understand it, I mean, first of all, that actually must have been somewhat of a traumatic experience, I'd presume.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty traumatic for the crew in that, I mean, whilst that could just all be down to coincidence, it seemed a bit strong for a coincidence. We're in this place that has all these legends of demonic kind of manifestations and the supernatural, and then all this really bad stuff happened. This guy that's worked in TV for years knows what he's doing, shatters his hip, the guy's dogs die all in the same night, all this other stuff happened, people experiencing weird stuff. That was the very last episode of Most Haunted I ever made after working on the show for 2 years.
I was going to say, actually, if that might have been your last thing with him, because the thing is as well, you're telling me this, and I'm straight away thinking of some of the weird shit that happened during the filmings of The Exorcist or The Omen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because it's I think when you start messing with that realm, whether it's for the sake of entertainment or anything else, things do, well, for a lack of a better word, they do manifest,
Yeah.
Obviously, for anyone who's not aware of what actually happened on those films, if you don't already know, I would imagine this is one of the things that most people know about it, but just go and read up on what actually happened on the sets of The Exorcist and The Omen, and all of the people who got fucked up during the filming. But yeah, you were gonna just say something, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the tip of the iceberg with stuff that happened working on Most Haunted. As I say, like, so much stuff happened when we weren't actually filming the show, but happened whilst we were in the locations around it. One of the when you just mentioned that kind of like working in places where there is an aura of an evil essence in these places, those were the places where stuff would more often than not occur quite profoundly. And one of the weirdest things that ever happened, we were filming a string of shows in Lancashire in England, up in Morecambe near Lancaster.
Yeah.
And there's a big old derelict theatre there called the Winter Theatre. And I think by now it's probably been renovated, but back then, about 12 years ago, it was a derelict building. The roof was falling in. It was a complete shell. but it's a stunning building. It's beautiful. Anyway, it's got a bit of a reputation for being an extremely haunted place, as a lot of theatres do, and that classic kind of ghost story of the haunted theatre is quite a trope of Gothic literature as well. And so we're filming another live show in this place, and first thing that happens when we get there, we're loading all the gear in, and there's a staircase there. And at the time, we didn't know this, but we were just walking up the staircase from the entrance foyer, and all of a sudden we just stopped. We could smell this really strong smell of cigar smoke. Like, cigar smoke has that really strong, pungent smell. It's really quite an obvious smell. And
I like cigars. I'm familiar with the smell of it. Yeah.
So this is inside the place. Nobody's allowed to smoke in there. It's a derelict building site, and
interesting.
On this staircase, there is this really strong smell of cigars. That's really, really strong. Like, weird. Is somebody smoking up there? We go and check. There's nobody smoking. And then after that, we smell that. We learn from the theatre manager that there is allegedly the ghost of an old theatre manager who used to like smoking cigars, who haunts the staircase, apparently, which we found out afterwards. But one of the weirdest things that happened in this place, we'd finished filming for the night, so like 3 a.m. in the morning. And me and 3 other guys, 2 other cameramen and sound guy, who at the time I lived with, a guy called Matt, we went to the very top of the gods, which is obviously, like the highest seating area in the place. And we went up there to retrieve a camera, which we'd left up there from doing some filming. And there's nobody else in the place whatsoever. There's a security guard on the door. We're the last people in the place. And we're walking up these long flight of stairs all the way up to the top. And we get to the last flight to get up to the gods. And it sounded like there was somebody behind us. We're like, who's that? Who's following us up there? There's nobody there whatsoever. Hearing these footsteps. And we get up to this God's level, looking right down onto the stage, through this big lighting rig, all the seats in front of us, and the lights are all still on beneath us, but above us, the roof, there's like the ceiling, and in between the ceiling and the roof, you've got the roof cavity, and there's a massive hole where the ceiling was derelict, it just fallen in, so you could see inside the roof space. And as we got up onto this God's level, these footsteps continued to follow us, and we were all stood still, and all 4 of us could just hear these footsteps circling us as we were stood there.
Oh, wow.
We're not filming at this point. We're just there taking a camera, getting a camera and taking it down. And we just stood stock still, like, this is, more than usually happened on the show. But after the footsteps had done a couple of laps of us, all of a sudden, we all became aware of this really bright light above us, and we looked up, and inside the roof space was what I can only describe as a ball of electricity, just floating in this roof space.
Orb.
It's way bigger than that. It's like 2 meters across, a 2 meter across sphere, just kind of hovering in this roof space. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my life. It was really weird. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was a ghost or if it was ball lightning. Ball lightning would obviously move through a place really fast, because that's a naturally occurring phenomenon. It was just this floating mass of electricity. No idea what it was. There's no lighting in this space, and it just fizzled out after about 20 seconds, and we were all just like, what on earth was that? And we all just legged it out of the place. we just ran, because it was just the most bizarre thing. But at the start of that night, because we were the camera team, when filming Most Haunted, the camera team ended up being on the show itself, part of the investigation team. So we're in the places filming, and stuff's happening, and we're people asking us what's going on and so forth. So we used to have this like psychic medium Whether you believe in psychic mediums or not, it's not for me to.
Some yes, some no.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And we've done. One thing I do believe in is the power of meditation and opening up your mind to spiritual connection.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which I know, I'm sure you are fully versed on. And before we started filming that night, we were in one of the hotels we were staying in. We were in one of the like a private lounge area we had, and the medium that we had working with us, we did like an hour and a half meditation session just to get us into the right kind of mindset to
that is long
experience stuff. Yeah. It was, and I remember during that session seeing really bright, vivid visions in my mind's eye. And obviously this is completely sober, no other kind of substances to influence these things. And
I think actually, sorry to interrupt you there, but I actually think that these experiences are actually far more potent when you are sober.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, definitely. Because
it says a lot, I think.
Well, yeah, there's no psychotropic substances that you can attribute any kind of phenomena to then, are there, other than your own naturally occurring chemicals that we all have, like naturally occurring DMT and that kind of thing. But that night was one night when stuff just happened and people were seeing balls of electricity slowly moving through corridors at head height after that. It was the weirdest thing. It's a really, really interesting, and I would say one of the most supernaturally active places I've ever been in. And we filmed a couple of episodes in there. And it was always, even though it's a theatre, it's not like it's this old Gothic manor house. It's not like it's this old ruined castle. It was always the most intimidating location to go into, because we knew it was the place where stuff always happened. Weird stuff always happened there, and there was a real atmosphere about that place. But in that same week, there was a really long-running association with Most Haunted to the rather notorious Pendle witch trials, which you may be aware of. In the 17th century, in rural Lancashire, a lot of local peasants were essentially sentenced to death for witchcraft, and was part of the I guess it's their equivalent of the satanic panic, that we had in the 80s and 70s and 80s here. There was the witch craze of the 16th and 17th century, where there was a massive purging of, a lot of innocent people basically being hung for witchcraft. And we filmed a lot of episodes about the Pendle witches, because they're alleged to haunt these places where they lived in rural Lancashire near Burnley. And when they were actually imprisoned, they were imprisoned in Lancaster Castle itself. So Morecambe's very close to Lancaster, and that same week we shot some episodes in the cells where they were imprisoned before they were put to death. And there is a long-running history of people on Most Haunted being physically attacked by these alleged ghosts of the Pendle witches. All right. And they've done a lot of episodes way before I worked on the show, and this was the first show that I'd done with them, with the Pendle Witch Association there. And we were filming in this basement of this medieval cellar, essentially. And the team are doing like a seance, and we're filming it, we're all around it. And they had these like medieval incantations playing out into the space, mainly just because it creates a nice atmosphere for the TV show. It sounds interesting.
Yeah, sure.
And our sound guy, Matt, is got his boom pole, he's recording all the audio. And all of a sudden, he just slumps to the floor, straight on the floor. He's unconscious on the floor. And I felt a bit freaked out by that because I lived with him at the time. And he got carried out of the place by one of the security guards, and I went up with him. And he was just sat there outside in this courtyard on this bench, and his eyes were completely glazed over, and he was awake, and he was just staring straight forwards, and it was like he just wasn't there. He was just completely gone. And I was like, right in front of his face, shaking, Matt, you all right? Slapping his face, Matt, what's going on? Hello, all this kind of stuff that you would expect to do. And he was just completely gone. Wasn't there, didn't say a word. And what
happened then with him? Why did he collapse?
We don't know. But what happened?
Did he ever come back out of it?
Yeah, he did. But before he came out of it, whilst we were still sat in that location, because that was another live show, there was a lot of general public watching from outside of this place. And through the gathered crowd, a woman came saying, I'm a nurse, I'll help him out, trying to give him medical attention. And he actually went for the nurse when and this is completely out of character for him. He would never do anything like that. He had to be physically put back on the seat. Then this ambulance ended up coming, went in the back of the ambulance. We drove a mile down the road to Lancaster Accident and Emergency, and a mile down the road, I'm in the back of the ambulance with him, and he just suddenly comes round and goes, where the hell am I? And this paramedic's in the back, like, you're in the back of an ambulance, you've had a bit of a funny turn, we're just taking you to hospital just to give you a check over. And it's like, what the hell just happened there? Nothing like that's ever happened to him before or after. So it's like, unless it's some weird freak kind of mental health incident, I guess. I don't know. But it just so happened to occur when we were filming in a place where the Pendle Witches were held before being executed, and there was this whole long-running association. And what was really strange, I remember going back to the hotel at 5 a.m. after filming that episode, and in central Lancaster, and feeling a bit unnerved about the events of the evening, obviously hoping Matt was okay. And
I can imagine.
Just trying to process what had gone on. And I sat on the bed and turned the TV on because I wanted some sense of normality before going to sleep. Put the TV on, and you know how you turn a TV on, just a random channel, you press it on, it just comes on.
Yeah, you don't choose the first channel that comes on, do you? You just turn it on.
No, exactly. And by coincidence, there was a documentary about the Pendle Witches playing as soon as I turned the TV on.
The universe has a very funny way of speaking to us sometimes.
Yeah, now that could just be a coincidence, of course. But
I'm not into coincidences. Our world, the Matrix, is very black and white. It's all mathematical, and I think everything aligns perfectly for a reason. Yeah, that's very interesting. You mentioned something there on mental health as well. There are a lot of theories, that do actually relate these things together. Obviously, everyone approaches mental health from. To me, mental health has two or three different elements. Everyone in the common world approaches it as a thing of, okay, well, you just got a chemical imbalance in your brain, and that is less than satisfactory to me. I think that it's not just about the medication and shit that you take and things like that, but I think your diet actually has an extreme impact on your mental health. Actually, one of the biggest you can think of. There's also physical exercise. These things can help that massively. It's a great therapy to put yourself up for physical challenge, whether it's art, things like that. However, there does seem to be an element of the spiritual, a lot of, I know there's the whole thing, and there's probably, there still probably is a high possibility of debunking this, but I still think that it's worth mentioning because I know there's the whole thing of the shamans actually claiming that people with schizophrenia, their trouble is not just in terms of like what medication they need to be on and stuff. This is a spiritual problem that needs to be fixed through spiritual ways rather than
quite possibly,
and stuff.
I'm sure I'm not qualified enough to really pass a kind of scientific opinion on that, but yeah, you could well be right on that. I'm sure there is something in that, definitely. It would certainly seem that there would be. It is really interesting, I think. Have you always had an interest in the supernatural and the paranormal? Like, coming from obviously Iran, there must be there are the traditions in that culture on what the supernatural is and that sort of thing.
It's a funny one, obviously that's a very good question. For us, obviously Islam has such a big hold on our culture and things like that. I think it's a bit different because growing up, I was very much not even just religious for the sake of religious, but I believed in the divine wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
And then I sort of went off when I reached maybe age 15. I sort of started to fall out with it because I started to question things, and I started to question things at school, and I was like, well, hang on a minute. If a person is, for example, like the thing that really sort of caused for friction in my relationship with religion, Islam, especially back then, was that we got to learn that if a person is at any point in their life a Muslim, so be it if they were born Muslim or if they converted to it at any point in their life, or they converted to it because of marriage, whatever, doesn't matter. If you're a Muslim at any point in your life, and so like I said, in the case of being born into it, which is not even really your choice, if you choose to step away from that and convert to any other religion, or become an atheist, or become a Satanist, become a Christian, Jew, whatever, doesn't fucking matter. The consequence of that is that you become what they call mortad, which means that not only the state, but the average individual actually has a right to take your life because you chose to believe in something else. When I discovered this, I was a bit like, this doesn't sound right at all, and I questioned all of my religious teachers to fucking death, to the point that they had steams coming through their ears, and they started like questioning their own beliefs and things like that. So I was like, okay, all right, this is there seems to be a problem here, and obviously I fell out of love with it. And the thing that happens with a lot of us, particularly those of us who are into heavy metal, or this subculture in general, a lot of us are people who have sort of, for a lack of a better word, turned our backs against God and religion. Majority of us, I think, are. But a lot of people who you speak to, it's that when you first turn your back to that kind of thing, there seems to be a hole in you. There seems to be somehow there's something that you're now trying to fill. Because it's quite a shock, isn't it? That, oh wow, this thing isn't there. So like, what's your excuse for love and light in your life then, if you haven't got?
I guess what you're saying is the distinction is, I think for me, the distinction is not necessarily going against the divine, but going against the preconceived societal conventions of what God and the divine is in terms of organized religion, whatever that may be, whichever,
Well, in the long term, yes, absolutely that. However, when you're only 15, 16 years old, when you start to believe that, okay, God is not real, then you turn your back against everything that's like that, So you start to act out in different ways that are, you start to then actually break the boundaries of life, and stop breaking out of your mental cage that you are in. And this can be an extremely confusing and difficult thing, I think, for a lot of people, especially those in their youths. However, for me, so I obviously spent many years thinking like that, where it's like, oh yeah, fuck these people, fuck Islam. I still kind of feel that way, but from a very different perspective now than I did before. So yeah, it's sort of a case of then you just start living, and it's like a constant urge of rebellion.
I guess because you've lived in a state which oppresses any kind of reasonable dialogue. To the contrary, there's no kind of freedom of spiritual expression, so to speak. Although I know that Iran does have a Christian and Jewish population as well, doesn't it? But a very small one compared to its Islamic majority. I guess I know obviously the legalities of speaking out against that religion are very strict there.
If you are, so yeah, there are those, but if you think about it, most of the Christian people in Iran are actually Armenians. So they're not really, and Armenian people are cool, whatever, but they're not really Iranians. If I was to have converted, but okay, put it like this. I have a very strong feeling, I don't know the exact statistics, but I'm pretty sure that the majority of at least the Iranian refugees that are in the UK are here because they're Christians and their life would be in danger back home.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So that's actually, which is a kind of a fucking weird one to me. It's like, if you're not following Islam, it's like, you just got to go find abuse somewhere else. I don't get it. But, is one of them. But anyway, I digress to the point that you do, I think, when you fall out of sort of adoration with the divine at a young early age, then you sort of start to start discovering the darker paths, and you start going that way. But what's interesting about it is that eventually you will make your way back around to actually understanding the divine. However, you now have a choice of what it is that you want to follow and what it is that you're trying to bring into this world and allow for manifestations. For example, I think that that is actually one of the most beautiful things about black metal in general, is that whether the artist or the creator is aware of this or not, a lot of times what is happening is there seems to be that substance in the air, which is of the spirit world, that we become the vessel to it, and then it somehow seeps in through us, and then it comes out in the format of a song, and
that's really interesting. Yeah, that's really, sorry to interject, but that's really interesting that you've pointed that out, because that's something I've always felt with the genre, with all the sort of bands that I love within the genre, and with what I try and do with what we do. But it's a really another coincidence that you've mentioned that, and I don't know whether you may have listened to this or not, but I had a long journey to make with work today. I actually had to drive to Sheffield and back today, which is like a 4-hour round trip for me because I live down in Worcester. And I got in the car and I put on, do you know the Radio 1 DJ, Daniel P. Carter?
I do, yes.
Yeah, so he just recently did an interview with Eric Danielson of Watain. And it's a really fascinating interview. And I listened, it's just over an hour. I listened to it all on the way up to Sheffield this morning. And they were talking about that exact thing, and that creation of spiritual egregores, in the sense of a collective of people have like a unified spiritual vision of what they want to manifest, whatever that may be creatively. In this case, he's talking about Watain and what they do, and every song, and that spirit of the band creates almost like a spiritual entity that is fed not only by the core members of that band who have that kind of spiritual vision on what that entity should be, but it's then also grown by people that then follow that band and follow that artist, whatever that may be. And just this kind of spiritual entity that is the egregore, that is the spirit of that project, just grows and grows, and is this whole supernatural thing in itself. And I think that's a really amazing and interesting way of viewing that kind of spiritual element of what black metal should be, no matter what the outlook of any individual band, every individual band or project, no matter whether it's music or any form of art, you know, there is that deep kind of spiritual aspect to the whole process of creating something. And one of the things that's really important for me with music and black metal in particular is that things are sincere and genuine. And I only really appreciate and enjoy a band when I know that the people that are creating that music really mean what they're saying and really mean what they're doing. And whether somebody's a fan of them or not, I think a band like Watain really do mean what they're saying. And you can't help but respect that. And I'm always drawn to bands that seem completely genuine in what they're doing. And I think you can see through bands that aren't.
Yeah, that's right.
Those bands never really speak to me. And it really kind of solidified my view on what real black metal should be. And that's, I think, I mean, we're talking about supernatural stuff here. And I think that's partly, these are all subjects that kind of are all in sync with one another, aren't they? You know, I think
in my world they are, yes. So I can.
Yeah, I like my interest in the supernatural is very much like intertwined with my interest in music, and my interest in the supernatural started from a very, very young age. I remember sitting around, and I remember one of my first kind of exposures to supernatural subjects was just sat at my grandma and grandpa's house, and my grandpa at the time was an architect, and he worked for the local council, and he was working in his offices, which were in an old converted manor house in West Sussex. And I just remember him talking about all the architects didn't like walking down this one staircase because the ghost of a monk haunted it. And he's a very rational guy, and I must have been like, I don't know, 6 or 7 at the time, I don't know. And I've always remembered him telling me that story, and that was like the trigger point where that interest in the supernatural world was kind of ignited, and it's always grown since, and it's been a lifelong passion of mine. You know, the idea of ghosts, the supernatural, haunted places, and then obviously that feeds into like the occult and esoteric mysticism. And obviously, music's just fed on from that. It's something that I'll always love. Whether it be like literature, like ghost stories that are completely made up, or you know, real accounts of ghosts. I find it all fascinating. Was that the case for yourself? Like growing up, was there always that? You talked about that strong religious aspect of your young life growing up, but was there always like that predisposition to be interested in the supernatural?
Well, I don't look at it as the supernatural. I just look at it as another part of existence, and as a part of being.
Sure, yeah.
You know, because, like I said, I look at it from a very concrete viewpoint. You know, and you know what? It's not an emotional viewpoint, like you mentioned earlier. You said that you know, Chris would like argue anyone to death about like what doesn't
Absolutely.
exist, and stuff like that. I don't even look at it like that. To me, I know what I know. You know, another person seeing the same thing or not is, frankly, I don't like that. Makes no difference in my world, because I know when I see things and when I witness patterns throughout life. It's you know, it's I know that our world is not as dry and fucking cynical as we sometimes like view it as. You know what I mean? There's so much calculations, and there's so much that goes on, you know. And as far as the quote unquote spiritual aspect of things, to me, that's just another part of existence. Sometimes a word, like imagination, there's this whole theory that intelligence is actually external rather than internal, and our brains are just antennas that channel this information when it comes from somewhere else. And I think that's, again, it's a scientific thing. So there's always the thing of, can we prove this right? Can we prove this wrong? In my world, I think that makes a lot of sense when it concerns things like creativity. I've had, without going into too much details, because especially of that project that we had partaken in this weekend, I've had moments in Trivex where I picked up the guitar, and then 30 minutes later, I have a 9-minute track, which is the most solid fucking thing we've ever worked on, and all it took was that, almost like I prepared myself, I opened myself, and then something just came and just, you channel that thing, you listen internally, you try to see where it wants you to go, and you hold your hand there, and then the magic starts happening. You don't have to think about it too much. And this is the real beauty of what we do, and then you mentioned about the whole process of like channeling things. One of the main reasons why we have the presence of bones and animals, or even some other things which I won't get into, but the presence of those things that we have on Trivex with us on stage is not because it looks cool. I frankly couldn't give a shit enough about that. I think me and Saul spend enough time working out in the gym to look cool enough, if we need it, without sounding arrogant. I said it as the thing of it is that we have those things on stage because that is a place where, it's the manifestation that takes place. It's the characteristics of something that is no longer really there in physical form, but rather a memory of it, and is allowing something that is no longer alive to experience glory along with us. And it's an act of celebration more than anything else, and I'm sure it is probably the case for a lot of others who do the same thing as well. But at least for us, that's how we approach it, So yeah,
that's what I'm talking about. That's that genuine nature of what you're doing. That genuine,
I suppose,
integrity.
And for me, just to answer your question as well, I didn't always feel this way. However, I did always feel that there was a purpose to my life. There was a purpose to me being around, that it wasn't just to, it's not always just about me either. That's been the hardest pill to swallow. Like, you always think that your life is, you're just trailing the path for yourself, but it's not. It's for everyone else involved. The entirety of the world and humanity. Without, and obviously that sounds like it's a lot of responsibility, but the cool thing about that is that you make positive changes to the world, or the necessary changes, I should say, by just being yourself and acting true to yourself and to your purpose.
Absolutely, yeah. I couldn't agree more.
Cool.
That's the way to behave, isn't it?
That's it. Yeah.
Definitely. Well,
all right.
I hope people don't think that this is some kind of just loopy conversation about ghosts, and people have their own opinions on what these things are. But I think what I would say to people is that they should remain open-minded about, it's that classic Shakespeare quote, isn't it? That there is more in this heaven and earth than you and I are ever likely to know. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. I really do.
Sure. Yeah.
Whatever those things are. So yeah.
That's it, man. And yeah, do you know what? I do very much appreciate you coming on the podcast as well. I think we're gonna have to do another episode where we just talk about Winterfylleth and the band, because this has been, but this is. Yeah, I think this has been a great conversation. And just to finish off on one point as well, you said something about how people will, if what will people think and stuff like that. Back to the point that I just said, you change the world by being yourself and by speaking your own truth. You can't concern what other people think, but rather, I think by just being yourself, and this is the thing that we're about 7-8 episodes into Iblis Manifestations now. One constant reminder that I have learned from this is that simply just by speaking your truth and by being yourself, you can create ignitions in other people which you might never even know about.
Yes, and that's really important. And that's one thing that that's one of the things that I value most about what we do in Winterfylleth, is causing those ignitions within people to pursue whatever interests that it might ignite. But to go back to what you just said, particularly with Winterfylleth, we've got to the stage now where, and me personally, I'm too old and jaded, so I really couldn't give a shit what people think of me or what they, I know.
And there is wisdom to that. You can't, if, especially as an artist, if you start living for, what might get said, then you're fucked. It's like being in a relationship and not speaking to your partner because you're afraid of how they might react to every single thing that you're going to say. It's like, you may as well just not fucking do it, So to me, it's kind of like that.
Yeah, we really don't care what people say about us. We know what we are. We know what we're about. We know who we are as people. And if people want to come and have a chat to us about stuff, then they're more than welcome to, and we'll have a nice chat, and
that sounds great. I appreciate your viewpoints on that. So just as a little plug before we go off as well, is there what's next for you guys? You're playing Incineration next month, correct?
Yeah, a couple of weeks now. Actually, I think it's.
I think it's 2-3 weeks from now. I will be there, by the way. I'll
excellent. We'll have to have a beer and have a proper chat and have a hangout.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't really drink beer anymore, but
we'll, or whatever, a drink of some description, orange juice. But
we'll drink some ethanol. Yeah,
ethanol. Yeah, because some spirits. And that's next on the agenda. Incineration. We're preparing for that at the moment, and after that, we've got some shows in Ireland. If there's any Irish people listening to this, Limerick, Dublin, Belfast in June. And we've just started very recently writing the next record. It's been a bit of a slower process than we normally try and keep going every couple of years. But because of the pandemic, we just thought, let's give ourselves a bit of time off. And we needed to tour for the new album.
The Reckoning Dawn came out just around the time of the pandemic.
That's right.
Correct? Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it did. It came out in the May after the pandemic started in the March. So we obviously had like 18 months before we played any shows for it, as with all bands that we're in the same situation. So we just thought, let's just chill out. We'll take some time off, obviously, forced time off through the pandemic, and then played live a bit last year, and we've got a few shows this year, some festivals in the summer, and we'll start writing now. So that writing started for the next album, which will be coming out on Candlelight, probably, I don't know, might not even come out for another couple of years, maybe, who knows, depends how long it's going to take us to write it. But Chris and I and Nick and a guy called Shane, who plays bass in one of Chris's other bands, his band Activist. We're actually deep into writing for another project at the moment, which is called Dismal Aeon.
What's the name again? Sorry?
It's called Dismal Aeon. And it's very different to Winterfylleth. It's like a death metal project, something that's been burning under wraps for us for a while now, and there's I'd say the lion's share of an album written for it now, and we're going to be recording that hopefully sometime this year, getting that out, and maybe even play some shows for it. So we'll see how that goes. And,
cool, man. That sounds fantastic.
That's pretty much it for us at the moment.
Right on. Yeah, I urge everyone to check out Winterfylleth, although chances are that if you're listening to this, you are already a fan anyway. But if you aren't, go and check out the band. Especially, I think your last album, Reckoning Dawn. I think it was pretty fucking. It's what I like about your band is that musically speaking, the direction it seems to actually get darker as it goes along.
Yeah.
I like songs like Absolved in Fire, which I think you opened pretty much all of the shows in the last year with, if I'm correct.
We do.
That's a cool one. I do really like that song.
That actually should resonate quite a lot with yourself coming from Iran, because that's about religious persecution and the persecution of beliefs due to like man's perception of how our religion should be taught, and so it's quite a deep one, that. But I think I see the way we're reacting to the world and current affairs at the moment. I can only see the next album just going down a darker path. So
I hope so.
Yeah. We shall see. We weren't always the darkest in nature, because it just didn't suit where we were in our lives at the time. But the world's a dark place at the moment. So
I suppose, yeah. All right, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Simon, for the episode. And also, as usual, I want to take a moment to say thank you all for listening to this episode of the podcast with my good friend Simon Lucas from Winterfylleth. I will catch you all at the next episode of Iblis Manifestations. Take care, people.